Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Wolf, and I just watched The Sounds of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. This is an Applejack and Fluttershy-centered episode, and as Twilight points out, it's pretty much the first time that the map has called a particular pair of ponies more than once. And yeah, I can see why these two characters were needed for this particular story. I can think of a few reasons as to why they could have made it more compelling in the long run, but we'll get into that. This was introducing a new race of creatures called the Kirin, and yeah, I have to say, these are some really interesting designs. I have never seen anything quite like this in the show before. So many very different skin tones. They got some fluff on the hooves and then some scales on the back of very long tails and horns that almost look like they could be unicorns. And at one point it does show that they have the power to make things levitate, and yet they have this ability to turn into Nuance, these fire creatures. And yeah, I can see so much potential for not only fan art but also fan fictions. I hope that the community takes advantage of what these creatures can do, but I don't know whether the show is going to be revisiting these creatures in the future. And that's a bit of a shame because, like I said, it's really interesting designs. It's really bringing a lot more into the world building, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Essentially, the story goes that these Kirin have taken on a vow of silence, a magically induced vow of silence, in the hopes that it will keep them from ever becoming angry again. Now, one might think it's because they're just trying to avoid bringing up contention, conflict, but it does go a little bit further than that. Whenever they show anger, they turn into their Nuance selves, and everything around them catches fire. So yeah, it is making much more of a world-building reason as to why they would not want to get angry, but I do find the concept pretty interesting that they were building up here. The idea that it might actually be better to suppress all of your feelings in order to avoid ever creating contention, any kind of conflict, any fighting whatsoever, in order to keep the status quo, in order to keep maintaining the world around you and create this beautiful setting. I mean, yeah, there are a number of people who could argue for the greater good, I suppose. And there was a great deal of potential set up for what makes sense on should we allow, as the song puts it, sometimes you've got to let it rain. Does that make sense for a society as a whole if you're going to allow creatures like the Kirin and their counterparts, the Nuance, occasionally get to a point where they could burn things around them, create that conflict and contention. And I think this episode explored part of that potential. I think they were able to set up some of that scenario, but not anywhere close to where they could have. I've seen plenty of other episodes of MLP where they were able to set up a really compelling notion where someone is having a deep struggle, not only that kids could understand, but also adults could understand. Again, something like Between a Rock Hoof and a Hard Place is a great example of that, where you don't really have a clear-cut answer, where you don't really know which direction would be the best to take. And in part, this episode sets up where, at least at first, where Applejack and Fluttershy are arguing with each other, that if they get angry, they could set fire to everything around them, and where if you're suppressing your emotions all the time, could you really even call that living? There is arguments both ways, but it very quickly becomes extremely black and white. I imagine that the episode could have used at least a bit more of trying to teach the Kirin, or the Nuance, on how to properly vent that anger. They did have one very quick scene where Autumn Blaze is playing charades with other ponies, and yeah, there were some little bits of comedy thrown in there that I did appreciate, but where she was able to vent her anger by leaving the scene for a little bit and having her moment and then coming back and saying, continue. And yeah, if they were to explore that angle a little bit further and show that, yes, you can have your anger and find proper ways of venting that anger, it would have made for a better story, in my opinion. They had this setup and only barely hinted at what a good solution could be, but again, making it very black and white, like, this is the path you should follow, and this way is never going to work. I don't know. I like a lot of the ideas that they were setting up. I absolutely do. There is a great deal of philosophical discussion that you can get out of, is it worth all of that potential conflict and perhaps even destruction if you allow, as this episode is implying, freedom of speech? Because a vow of silence, a magically induced vow of silence, yeah, that has a lot of potentially dark implications. But if they are choosing it for themselves, like this episode is shown, then yes, you could argue that if they brought it on themselves, that they have wanted this world for their own reasons, and maybe we should allow them to keep it that way. But that kind of turns it on its head when Fluttershy and Applejack are in the middle of their argument, and because the Kirin are saying to themselves in their own minds, oh, we can't ever allow this, they levitate them up and are about to take them to the stream of silence themselves, against Applejack and Fluttershy's wishes. I mean, they can hear what they're saying. Again, it makes it very black and white in that scenario. I wish that they could have made it many shades of gray in between, showing that there is potential for both sides, that you could understand, well, yes, there is merit to this argument, but there's merit to this argument. Can we find compromise in between? I honestly think that this particular story would have had a lot more memorability if they had gone down that route. And especially with the way the episode comes to an end extremely abruptly with a hoof bump and everything's okay. And I'm still wondering if we're ever going to see the Kirin again. I don't know. I left the episode feeling like I like what they were trying to do. I like the philosophical discussions that this episode could instigate, but with what there is, I feel like it's maybe halfway there, most of the way there, but there's several steps that they kind of missed in the process. Like, they could have come up with something really great, but end up with something that's between okay and good, in my opinion. I did very much appreciate Autumn Blaze as a character because, yeah, she really stands out with how she's interacting with Applejack. And the song is actually really catchy. And yeah, we have a equestrian version of Phantom of the Opera. The music of the night. I would love to see that, by the way. That would be so fun in universe. Who do you think they'd get to play the characters? I want to see comments on who you would put in each of those roles. There's also a number of blink and you'll miss it references that, hey, that's actually pretty clever, but I doubt the kids will ever get that. And other than that, like I said, I love the design of the Kirin race. I like the world that they were creating. I even liked some of the background music that they created to help differentiate this Kirin world. Makes it feel very going into a bit of an alien nature. So there's all this wonderful buildup of potential, and I can't imagine that this episode is going to be forgotten that easily for those elements. I just wish that the story and the lesson that they were trying to teach had just a few more elements put into it. Just a few more. I like what they were going for. I like some of what they've accomplished with it. I just feel like, given what I've seen in the past from the staff of MLP, I know that they've done better. Does that mean every episode needs to be that good? Probably not, but if it sparks a good discussion, maybe they've done their job. Maybe. But what do you guys think? given everything that we've seen in the Sounds of Silence, from the wonderfully creative design of the Kirin race and the world that surrounds them and the music that goes with them, I really like that. And putting the characters of Applejack and Fluttershy in this scenario, do you think that these two characters in particular were what were really needed here? Do you think that all the potential that could have been had from this episode actually did come? Let me know in the comments below, because as always, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.